And happy Halloween to everybody. And we are on page 139 of this book, The Imitation of Christ. We are in book 3 called Interior Conversation, and we're on chapter 20 on acknowledging our own infirmities and the miseries of this life. All right. Chapter 20. The disciple. Lord, I will acknowledge my sin before you and confess my instability. Often some trivial thing depresses me, leaving me dull and slow to do good works. I resolve to stand firm, but at the slightest temptation, I am set back. You know, it's a very common practice, as probably many of you know, in Christianity, this idea of confessing your sins openly with one another. And when the church came along, some 400 years later, they kind of formalized that into a process involving a priest. But initially, it was just a matter of being honest with where you're at and who you are so that your ego doesn't develop without you knowing it. And also that you don't falsely present yourself as something greater than what you are. So those were the reasons that I was taught, that we confessed our sins one unto another growing up. But as a Vedantan, I'm really beginning to understand there's the actual reason, I think, because it's such a practical advantage, is that it brings it into awareness. And when you bring your faults into your awareness, you stop. You stop doing it. And so really, I think primarily it's about bringing your wrong thinking, your wrong ideas, your wrong movements. Into the light so that it stops doing. Because the Christians have to do it in a little bit of a different way because they keep insisting on this evil nature, this fallen nature of ours, as an ego self, and so they don't really have that knowledge that our true self is the image of God that's within, and that we don't naturally do wrong things. We only do wrong things when we're fooled into thinking that they're right things, right? And so by confessing them, being honest with them, just letting them be out there in the open, then we can see their real nature. We can see, no, this is not part of my nature. This is not who I am. And that awareness itself will drive that fault away. So he's praying to the Lord and he says, often little things depress me. I try and make a big stand, to change my life. But then I'm at the slightest temptation, I'm set back. How do I do this? Because there's several reasons behind it. One is it's not so much the thing itself. We work through the thing itself through discernment, trying to see its real nature, trying to see what it really gives to us, and whether or not it actually meets our desire. Because the truth of the matter is, no, they don't. Because everything is temporary. It doesn't last, and it just leaves us wanting more. But the other thing that happens when you invest in your vice is you wear a groove in your mind. You wear a pathway. And if you've done that vice enough, there's a deep groove there, and it's hard to get the tracks out of it, to break out of there. And so really dealing with wrong thinking or unhelpful activities is one, to bring it into your awareness. Yes. Two, discern it, look at it, measure it, see what it's really about. And after you're convinced that it's not really what you're interested in, but you're still somehow being caught up in it, you're still somehow falling to it, the third thing that's required is renunciation. But renunciation can only come after the discernment, after you go in and realize the true nature of the deed or of the activity, and seeing that it doesn't give you what it promises, it doesn't serve you. And once you get a good, strong spiritual practice going, you then see that it's actually destructive, because there are certain awarenesses that are more subtle that you experience inside, like feeling the inner bliss, for instance, that's natural to you, that's native to you. That bliss, that sense of bliss, is quite subtle in there. And if you're not pure, if you're not keeping your life on the up and up, trying to take care of the yamas and niyamas, uh, it, then you don't have access to that natural bliss within, because the mind is activated and the mind distracts you, and you're caught up. You bring your energy down to the body mind level, and that's what you're paying attention to, and you become irritable, you become whatever in those things. And so you begin to see these things and understand these things as we progress in spiritual life. So your vices, easy to take care of. It's just your sincerity in doing it that's rather difficult sometimes. So be honest about it, admit it to yourself, bring it before the Lord, bring it before others if you want to, if you have people that you trust and who will help you. The second thing is discern. Know that it's not real. Know that it doesn't present to you what you're really wanting. It doesn't last. And it's harming your enjoyment of spiritual life, because a good conscience or a bad conscience is very hard to drag before the Lord. It's very hard to sit in meditation with a bad conscience going on. And the third thing is a good, strong renunciation. After you've seen that it's not what you want, you have to just put your foot down, because you've got a habit now that has to be broken. So you broke the delusion through discernment, but then you have to break the habit through renunciation, right? And that's kind of how it all works together. And our disciple goes on praying. He says, sometimes from a mere trifle, a grievous temptation arises. And just when I feel sure that I think I have the upper hand, suddenly I'm almost overcome by the least thing. Right? So this is common complaints. I mean, we've all had these complaints. We've all heard these complaints. That it's very difficult to control ourselves and to undo all of the bad habits that we've sometimes spent a great deal of our life developing. 2, therefore, dear Lord, see my wretchedness and my frailty, which are best known to you above all others. Have compassion on me and deliver me from sinking into the mire of sin, that I may not stick fast in it. But this is what disturbs me and often confounds me in your sight, that I am so prone to fall and so weak in resisting my passions. And though I do not give in to them altogether, yet their assaults are troublesome to me, so that I am wearied by a daily conflict. Yet I know such conflict is not at all unprofitable to me, for by this I see my infirmities better and understand that such evil fantasies rush in upon me more easily than they depart. I would that you, most powerful God of Israel, the lover of all faithful souls, would look upon the sorrow and struggle of your poorest servant and come to my assistance in all that I must do. Strengthen me, O Lord, and with heavenly fortitude, so that the old enemy, the devil, and for us Vedantins, the devil can be very, very easily equated with egoism. The devil and my wretched flesh, not yet fully subject to the Spirit, may not prevail over me, for it is against them that I must fight continually during this wretched life. And what kind of life is this, where troubles and miseries are never wanting, and everywhere there lurk snares and enemies? For as soon as one temptation or trouble goes away, another comes. And while the first struggle is still on, many others suddenly rise up unexpectedly. How then can this life be loved, which is so full of bitterness and subject to so many trials? How can it even be called life, since it brings forth so many deaths and spiritual plagues? Yet it is loved, and many seek all of their pleasure in it. The world is often blamed for being deceitful and vain, yet it is not easily given up, especially when the desires of the flesh take hold. Some things lead us to love this world, and others to despise it. And we're going to switch kind of the tack of that conversation a little bit, because there's a few things that they don't mention at all in there, and it's kind of not even a part of Christian theology. But the Vedanta teaches us, and it's very, very, very helpful, because this exact problem that he's talking about, that you can't get rid of these problems, all of them come from being body and mind identified, right? Being body and mind identified, saying that I am the body and I am the mind. That opens the door because it's you identify with the body then, and you think that the body's desires, the body's urges, and the body's hungers are your hungers and your needs. And so it gives you a false sense of freedom to fulfill what you think is your desires because you want them, right? And in that mature in for the deluded person, for those of us who aren't seeing clearly, freedom means doing what we want to do, fulfilling our desires. But once we investigate spiritual life and we come to realize it's not our desires that we're fulfilling, right? Our desires are the spirit, the desires of the self, of the Atman. And when you go inside and do that discerning work, when you go inside and find out the nature of your inner world, you find out that all requests, all desires arise from body or mind. They never arise from the self within, from the observer. And so through that discernment, you come to know that these are not natively your desires. They are not what you want to do. And fulfilling them is not freedom, it's bondage, because you're beholden to something that is not you. You're serving something that is not you and giving up your choice in that. So the first realm of attack, it's because we really don't need to go stomping out a forest fire one flame at a time. That's not really going to work. What we want to do is cut down all the trees. Probably don't really want to do that, but it's a good analogy, because by withdrawing our identity from body mind, that's the equivalent of removing the forest. So there's nothing to burn, right? Then the body wants what the body wants, but we know that it's not our desire. Was that an arm up, Cookie?
Yes, I just was wondering, how can body and mind have a desire if it's not living without the self, the soul?
Well, it has its urges that it is living. I mean, the body has the self in it, has the Atman in it. That's what animates it and gives it its power to function. But when we identify with body, we give it the motivating power, the power to move and desire and go with our Ananda aspect. We give it the ability to argue and the ability to justify itself by giving it our wisdom, right? And it lives through our existence, through our being. And so when we draw near to the body, we activate all of those things in the body. And the body then becomes its own, just like we think that we're separate from God, then our body mind also begins to think that that it's its own thing, separate and apart from our will, from the Atman inside, the spirit inside. So it's activated by those things. But when we withdraw that identity with body mind, the body mind does not have the battery installed. It's like pulling the battery out of the ever ready bunny. It just stops running. And so if you successfully can withdraw your identity from body mind, if you do it all the way, of course, the body drops off. But Thakur has said that that's very difficult for an average person, for a normal person to do. So he says, you just do it the best you can, and whatever remains, just make it a servant of God, make it a lover of God, like that. So we get through it that way. But we discern. We first discernment is going in and finding out what is real and what's not real, right? And then we make the statement when we look and see where our desires are arising from. We see that they're coming from the body, that they're coming from the mind. And when one of those desires arise, we say, that's a desire of the body. I am not the body. And we employ our renunciation. We let it lie. And
So it's just the magician's play, like because the self was always remains the constant variable, but with body and mind, as long as life is filtering through those lenses, if there's any debris per se to activate through, only if it identifies with those things, is it a desire? But when there's no identification with anything, it's just the idea of I was just kind of like just thinking the thought of a mind and a body having a desire, just like it kind of struck my gong, because it was like those things are nothing without the self. So they
yeah,
alone they can't do anything alone because they don't exist. right?
Well, they exist, but I mean, we get a good example of what a body is with no Atman. It's a dead body,
Yep.
and there's no desires there, nothing. It has no battery in it, has no power to move. But the Atman is that battery, and when it enters the body lives, and then all of the bodies, because the body is a temporary thing in a temporary world, so it does have its hungers, that are valid because it needs food, it needs sleep, it needs shelter, it needs heat, it needs love, all of those things. So those desires are all activated by the Ananda in you, right? And then it takes on your sentience by taking your sat, and then it takes on its argumentative state, its tempting state through the wisdom that you give it. When you share those three things, you share your Satchitananda with it through identity. When you say, I am the body then has full access to your Satchitananda. And it expresses it for its needs. I love food, I love attention, I love water, whatever. It's activated by all that. So in our first through spiritual life, just our ongoing effort is to constantly see that we're not the body and that we're not the mind by just going inward and observing, being aware, internally aware of what's going on. So that's the first step. And then the second step is to continue that discernment, in particular toward your actions that you're tempted toward. And then the third thing is, once you realize they're not what you want and it's now just old habit that keeps putting them in your face again, at that point we do what Ramakrishna says, we just give a one grand renunciation. We just stand up and say, nope. But if you do that grand renunciation without knowing that you're not the body mind, then you get into the circumstance exactly what he's describing here. You just keep saying no, and the thing just keeps coming back. No, yeah, no, yeah, no, yeah, no, yeah, okay. Right? It just wears you out just by representing again and again and again. But that representing, if you are doing the not body mind method, then that should diminish over time. If the thing is still coming and going all the time, then you need to start checking your sincerity and your earnestness. Those two things. You need to look at it and do a little bit more discernment, because there's probably still quite a bit of attachment going on, that you're not being honest with yourself when you renounce. You're kind of like, no, but maybe. And then it won't leave you alone. If you know that your yes isn't a yes or your no isn't a no, then it's hard to get the body mind to obey, because they think they've got a chance and they're going to go for it. All right. So all of that there. But I just don't like this idea, that we just wallow, because you read this kind of material and it just makes you feel like you're just going to wallow in it. And that's not true. We do become victorious, and it does fall away partially of its own accord through discernment, and through an active investigation inside, again, so that when you're not the body, not just think you're not the body, excuse me, I'm doing old man things again. Instead of thinking about the body, identifying with the body, we get that withdrawal, and it will calm it down. And through our earnestness and our sincerity, we finish it off, so that the body knows it doesn't bring it up again when you said no, because it knows, as it were, that your no is no. Those things that lead a person to love the world are sensual desires, the enticements that lure the eyes, and the pride and riches. Yeah, again, through that body identification, we have access to all those things. And it's not so much that the body is into evil things. The body just needs these things, is designed for these material things, and it just is disposed toward them. And the conflict only happens because you, the self, are not disposed toward them. They are not of your nature. And so when you engage in them, they hurt your nature. You feel a wound from them. And to cover that wound, if you don't know what caused the wound, if you're not familiar with your nature and how to serve your nature, then these wounds that happen inside just exist in there, and they drive you into a state of aversion. And that's when you start looking for the world for comfort. And the comfort that the world can give, the only comfort the world can give, is distraction. It can't fix anything. Only the self can fix anything, right? And so we start being attracted to things that divert us, that entertain us, that keep our mind from having to deal with this pain that we feel from all of these wounds inside that we don't know where they're coming from. Or because we've long forgotten what we did and how it affected us, right? And so we have to go through that whole discernment again, that process, to get in, become familiar with what the real fruit of identifying with the body really is. It's insecurity, it's fear, it's old age, it's hunger, it's lust. That's the real nature of identifying with the body. But the pains and miseries that follow them breed a hatred of and a disgust with the world. Okay. Yeah, not necessary. We don't need to develop aversions. We just need to see the truth, right? So aversions are just as bad as attractions. So we don't want to turn our attractions into aversions either. We just want to come to an understanding so that it's neutral. We don't care about those things because we know that they are not us and that they do not apply to us and that they are not helpful to us. But sad to say, a little, what does it say here? But sad to say, a little pleasure dominates the minds of the worldly, driving out their hearts all heavenly desires to such an extent that many imagine that joy is to be found in living under such sensual pleasures. That is because they have neither seen nor tasted the sweetness of God and the inward virtue of joy. There, we're beginning to touch on it a little bit. Thank you. Woohoo! They mentioned the options, the other option, that we have not seen or tasted because we've been stuck in this bad habit for a long time. We've forgotten what it was when we were pure, when we weren't selfish, and when we were kind of, at least not violating our Satchitananda, that we're not really aware of it. So that's how we lose the knowledge of how to take care of that inner pain that we're trying to take care of by going to the discos and drinking and drugging and doing whatever else we're doing to distract us from those things. Now we've got the information on how to really take care of them because we know what's really causing them. And at the root of that, it's simply identifying with body-mind. But those who utterly despise the world, those whose no is no, let's put it that way, for those sensual desires of the body and mind, those who utterly despise the world and strive to live under holy discipline experience the heavenly sweetness promised to spiritual persons. Oh, it's promised to everybody, and every person is spiritual by nature. They also see the errors of the world and how it is deceived in so many ways. Absolutely. So it's through our practice that we come to realize these things and that they lose their grip over us. They lose power over us through that discernment, through that renunciation, and through that constantly reminding yourself that I'm not the body and I'm not the mind, right? So what he's calling worldly people here are people who are body-mind identified and who are interested in finding things that are good for a body and a mind. And they're not really concerned about a self because they haven't done the inner work of discernment to even realize that they exist as a self separate from body-mind in there. All right, chapter 21, on how we are to rest in God above all things. Disciple, above all things and in all things, rest, my soul, in the Lord your God, for he is the eternal rest of the angels and the saints. Indeed, he's that breath, I was going to say he's that breath of fresh water, but that makes no sense at all. He's that drink of fresh water, that breath of fresh air. Your nature is all that you need. That's where you find all of your bliss and all of your joy. That's why Swami Prabhupada, I asked him one time, many, many years ago. This was when, um, this was when, what was going on at that point? Oh, Houston Smith had just put out a book on spirituality and drugs. I don't know that was the title, but it's something like that. And he was talking about how, oddly enough, in many of the world's spiritual traditions, in a lot of them, there's some amount of psychedelic use, that's indicated in there at some point. And so I was curious, and I went to Swami and I asked him. I said, "What about that, Maharaj? What about taking drugs?" And I mentioned that in my 20s that I had done something. I tried one of those hallucinogens and had had a very profitable experience from it. I mean, I definitely saw some things that have become very helpful to me in my spiritual life. And I asked Swami, I said, "Is there a value to it?" And I expected to get kind of the party answer to him that he would say, "Oh, no, don't touch those things. That's evil. That's terrible." But Swami was way beyond that. And he looked at me, he said, "Yes, there is an advantage. You can taste some spiritual truth through some of those drugs." He said, "But there's a big problem." He says, "You see, that's not the ideal of Vedanta. The ideal of Vedanta is freedom. And if you go outside of yourself for any experience or for any need, you are enslaving yourself to that thing that you're going outside for." And he said, "So even though you may get a taste of spiritual life, you may get a taste of a spiritual truth through those things," he says, "the destruction is going to be worse than the benefit, because they come with addictions, both psychological and physical. And you're just basically moving your struggle to overcome from the inside to the outside." So he says all of those things that you can get through drug use can be yours without the drug through spiritual practice, right? That they can all be experienced. And so he says, make it your own. Don't make yourself beholden to something outside of yourself. "O most loving Jesus, give me this special grace to rest in you above all created things, above all health and beauty, above all glory and honor, above all dignity and power, above all knowledge and prudence, above all riches and talents, above all joy and gladness, above all fame and praise, above all sweetness and consolation, above all hope and promise, above all merit and desire, above all gifts and rewards, that you may give or send, except yourself, above all joy or happiness that the human mind and heart can grasp or feel, above angels and archangels, above all heavenly hosts as well, above all things visible and invisible, and above all that is not you, my God." So basically he's saying, just keep your mind above body mind. That huge entire list that we just went through, you can go through it on your own and do the exercise and sort it out. Everything there comes from either a body or a mind for the angels. But we're not so concerned about them. They're not out to destroy us. All right. "For you alone, O Lord, are the greatest good." Always remember that. That's absolutely true. That you'll never be sorry about going inside and communing with yourself, with the divine, with the beloved, with what you can either call the divine principle, the presence of God, the self, the Atman. That God is the greatest good. And through that communion, through that awareness of the presence, that awareness of God, that is the one and only way to fix the wounds, to heal the wounds that you have created inside through wrong ideas, wrong thinking in the past. Right? So that's the only means, is to go in there, carry the wounds with you, carry them to the Divine Mother, hand them to the Divine Mother and say, this hurts. I'm in pain. I don't even know why. I don't even know what all this is about, but it makes me want to hide my face from you somehow. It makes me want to not sit and do my practice for some reason, right? So we take that to the Lord and we say, you alone are our most high and most mighty. You alone are sufficient and perfect. You alone are most sweet and consoling. You alone are the most fair and loving. You alone are the most noble and the most glorious above all things. In you, all good things are found, existing in all their perfection, and have always been, and always shall be. That's not a bad prayer just to pray when you sit down to be in communion, to be in practice with the Lord. Just sit there and say each one of those things, you know, and then pause after each one and think about it, you know, say, oh Lord, you are the greatest good. And just sit there and know that to be true for a moment. You alone are the most high and the most mighty. You alone are the most sweet and consoling, the most sufficient and perfect. You alone are the most fair and loving. You alone are the most noble and the most glorious above all things, right? And by doing this, you remind yourself, you remind your body and your mind that this self within is where they're going to get what they're looking for. This is where you're going to get the most sweetness, the most love, the most glorious things, you know, the most noble things, things that are sufficient, meaning you won't need them again and again and again and again, because they're eternal, right? Therefore, anything you give me besides yourself, anything you reveal or promise me concerning yourself, is all too little and insufficient for me, because my heart cannot rest, nor fully be content, until it rises above all your gifts and all you have created and rests in you. It's exactly right. And again, we could just say it has detached from body and mind and rests squarely in the shrine of the heart in the knowledge that it is the self, the divine presence. O Jesus Christ, most loving spouse, most pure lover, ruler of all creation, who will give me wings of perfect freedom to fly to you and in you to repose? When shall I be fully granted the perfect liberty to see how sweet you are, O Lord? When shall I be so perfectly recollected in you as not to be aware of myself, but only you, above all the things of sense, in a way not known to all, right? So again, so perfectly collected in you, we've completely put our entire identity in the divine principle within, sitting squarely in the shrine of the heart, right? When I shall be granted the perfect liberty to see how sweet you are, because indeed there we find that sweetness, right? And that not I, but thou is a denial of the egoism, right? The I that is talking about is this I that's based on identity with body mind. So we deny that I, and we encourage the I that is united with the sweetness, with the beloved. And just even here, just reading this and paying attention to what it says, it brings up that bhakti inside. It really arouses that love in there. I just listen to these words. They're so beautiful. Oh, Jesus Christ, most loving spouse, most loving spouse. There is no other partner. There is nothing else in your life that you can partner with to get that amount of love from, that amount of security from. The most loving spouse, the most pure lover, right? And what is pure? Pure means no selfishness. So a lover with absolutely no self-concern, right? The most wonderful of lovers, a lover who gives fully of themselves to you. Ruler of all creation, right? So God is not under the sway of anything else. So he is your freedom. Who will give me wings of perfect freedom to fly to you and in you to repose? Imagine that, just wings to fly to the beloved in perfect freedom. and then to alight there and to take full repose, just complete, fearless, open relaxation at the breast of the divine. When shall I be fully granted the perfect liberty, right? Nothing is binding you. You're not beholden to anything. Nothing is limiting you or restricting you. When shall I be fully granted the perfect liberty to see how sweet you are? This is the goal of life, spoken in a different way, to see how sweet the divine is. That's why we practice. That's why we meditate. That's why we pray. That's why we serve. When shall I be so perfectly recollected? When will I have myself together, right? In you, as not to be aware of my ego self, right? Not to be aware of the hungers and desires of the body for the outside world, but only you, above all things of sense, right? When I've come to know that all the things the senses give me, the only thing they do is give me more hunger. Give me my favorite food, and all I want is more of it. Give me pleasures of any kind, and all I want is more of it. Because the only thing this world can give you is a memory. And that memory will nag you until it dies. It will constantly remind you of that pleasure, but it will forget all the misery that surrounds that pleasure. Above all things of sense, in a way not known to all, right? Certainly anybody attached to body and mind is not going to know anything or very little of this divine freedom, of this absolute expansion inside. But now, how often I sigh and complain of the miseries of this life. Indeed, I'm seeing Ramakrishna here, as he's rolling around in the dirt at the end of the day. Oh, mother, another day has passed in vain. I haven't seen you, right? How often I sigh and complain of the miseries of this life. I daily meet with many evils in this vale of miseries, which often trouble me, sadden me, and darken my way. They often hinder and distract me, lure and ensnare me, preventing me from going freely to you, from enjoying. It's, and this is the funny thing, they don't necessarily stop you from freely going. They kind of delude you into not wanting to go. You see, it's quite a different thing. They're not physically stopping you from going. They're just deluding you into thinking that you want something different, that it would be nicer to sit and watch Tom and Jerry right now than it would to meditate for a half an hour, From enjoying the sweet embrace you always grant it to your blessed spirits. Let my sighs and my many desolations move your heart and incline you to hear me. And of course, we're turning God into a person there, right? Because we don't have to move the heart of God to incline him toward us. But we have to move our own heart to incline it toward God. But the heart of God is always present, always available to us, always waiting for the slightest cry in you. O Jesus, light and brightness of eternal glory, the joy and consolation of all Christians who labor as pilgrims in this sinful world, no words can express the desires of my heart, but let my very silence speak to you and say, how long, O Lord, will you delay your coming? Absolutely, boy, that's the fastest way to some bliss right there, is to do exactly that, to let your very silence speak to God. Just sit there, open all the windows so all that pain can just be seen. Don't think about it. Don't analyze it. Don't describe it. Just simply sit in the presence of Mother and open everything and let her feel the pain. Let her feel what you're going through, and that will be the answering of the Lord for sure. I trust that you will come soon to your poor servant. Make me joyful and deliver me from all my troubles. Come to me, dear Lord, for no day or hour is happy without you. Wow. Some beautiful, beautiful, beautiful words there. Makes you just kind of want to be quiet for a moment to just, my beautiful, beautiful friend. Hello. You are all joy and gladness. Without you, it's barren. It's empty. Right? I think back to my life in my cubicle, doing my computer work every day. And the only reason I was there is because I needed the money to play. And I just remember day after day after day of that, just the torture inside, just the torture of having no meaning, of having no idea how to fix it, having no idea where to look, where to run, just having to slog through it. You are all my joy and gladness, and without you, all is barren and empty. I am miserable and, in a sense, a prisoner in chains until you visit me with the light of your presence. Give me liberty of spirit and turn your friendly face toward me. Right? So I'm misery, in a sense, a prisoner in chains, indeed. But what are the chains binding you to? It's to the material world, to the body and mind. That's what the chains are binding you to. Until you visit me with the light of your presence, right? That divine presence, which is the salve of the heart, that immediately heals the pains, immediately begins putting the wounds back together inside. Until you visit me with that light of your presence, give me the liberty of spirit, right? That liberty of knowing that I'm spirit. I'm not body. I'm not mind. I don't die. I don't decay. I don't hurt. I don't break. I'm none of these things. I'm not limited in any way. Give me that liberty of spirit and turn your friendly face toward me. Right? Let me see that beloved face. Others may seek whatever they please, but there is nothing that pleases me, nor ever shall, but you, my God, my hope, my eternal salvation. I will not remain silent, nor cease to pray until your grace returns to me and I hear you speak to my soul once more. To hear you speak to my soul once more. Christ, behold, I am here. This is Jesus speaking. Behold, I'm here. I come to you, for you have called me. Your tears and the longing of your heart, your humility and contrition, they have moved me to answer your prayer. Disciple, Lord, I called you, for I long for your presence, and I am prepared to renounce all things for your sake. It was you who first moved me to seek you. Be you blessed, O Lord, for showing such goodness to me out of the abundance of your mercy. What more? What more, O Lord, can I say in your presence? I can only humble myself before you, ever mindful of my own iniquity. There is none like you, O Lord, in heaven or on earth. Your works are good. Your judgments are wise and true. Your providence governs all things. Praise, glory to you, O wisdom of the Father. Let my tongue, my soul, and all created things praise and bless you. Wow. We're really opening that treasure chest of bhakti tonight. That's beautiful. Chapter 20 thing. Chapter 22. On remembering the manifold benefits of God. Disciple. O Lord, open my heart to your law and teach me to walk in the way of your commandments. Right? Give me the grace to understand your will, and with great reverence and careful consideration, remember all your blessings in general and in particular, so that from now on I may be able to thank you for them worthily. See, he's kind of setting up here what we talk about is to have this constant awareness of these beautiful gifts that we get, the advantage that we have in being with the Lord, right? So that what? So that it generates that gratitude inside, that gratitude that inspires us and calls us forward, so that we're no longer driven by grabbing, hungering, wanting, pulling. Instead, we are at peace in the presence of God, and that gratitude of having been saved from all of that horror of that material life calls us forward. We go forward naturally for love, for seeing the face of the beloved. It's no longer a pushing, no longer a trying, no longer an effort. But I know and confess that I am unable to praise and thank you adequately, not even for your least gift, for indeed I am less than all your blessing you have given me. When I consider your infinite nobility and worthiness, my spirit trembles before their greatness. Lord, all that we have, both in soul and body, whatever we possess within or without, naturally or supernaturally, comes from you and shows forth your bountiful goodness, from whom we have received everything that is good. Although one has received more and another less, yet all of this comes from you, and without you, not even the least can be had. This is interesting, though, here, because he says, some have received more and some have received less. I don't know that with spiritual gifts, that can't be true. Because they're all infinite in their nature. It's up to us to unpack that, to see that, right? But it's not that it gives some less and some more. It's that some realize less and some realize more. Some are able to see, some are able to hold more, because they've closed up all of their leaky holes, right? They've done their discipline, they've done their yamas and niyamas, so they've battened down all the hatches. So when the Lord pours all of that bliss within, it doesn't activate all of their bodily functions, but it actually fills up and becomes a power to radiate spirituality, a power to radiate love, a power to understand others, a power to empathize deeply with others. These things you can't do when you've got all of your energies running around, the lower 2 or 3 chakras. You can't feel another person's inner world as long as you're hanging out in the first 3 chakras, because all those chakras are about is using another person. Getting what you need from that person, whether it's friendship, whether it's lovership, whether it's companionship. It's all about getting, because in the first 3 chakras, you're always hungry. You're totally world-based. But when you rise up, when you do that discipline, you close those hatches down, so that nothing can leak out down there. None of that energy can leak or be expressed in unworthy ways. That energy rises up, and when it gets to the heart chakra, then you're suddenly awakened to a space where you don't want to talk about anything but the beloved, where love itself is the only thing that feeds you, and you just share and share, care and care, and that opens your depth of empathy, so that you can understand a person, you can love a person in a real way, in a meaningful way, in a knowing way, right? So those things come through that practice. All right. Give me the grace to understand your will, and with great reverence and careful consideration, remember all your blessings, in general and in particular, so that from now on I may be able to thank you for them worthily. Right? What time is it? Oh, all right, one more verse here. Lord, all that we have, both in soul and body, whatever we possess within or without, naturally or supernaturally, comes from you, shows forth your bountiful goodness, from whom we have received everything that is good. Although one has received more and another less, oh, or realizes more, yeah, yet all comes from you, and without you, not even the least can be had. Persons who have received more cannot boast as though they had gained it by their own merit, nor consider themselves above others, nor look down on those who have received less. For those who are greater and more acceptable to you, whose attribute who attribute less to themselves, returning humble and devout thanks to you, those who through humility consider themselves the least and most unworthy of all, are fit to receive still greater blessings, right? Because that humility only comes through that understanding that you're not the body and mind. You know, that expansion only happens when you break apart from the limits of the material, which is what you're doing when you separate from body mind. You're taking out the limitations and restrictions that you have identified with, that you've held on to, for the sake of security, for the sake of feeling like you're in power, right? Which is the only way out when you don't know the way out. That's why egoism causes you to be mean and want to become a ninja so that you can be all powerful. You know, it's like, that's why we like these violent movies where you have those guys like, I don't know, John Wick, or any of the Reacher, those ones that I see on YouTube all the time. Those are very satisfying to an ego, you know, because an ego wants all that power and that ability to rah, I can beat everybody up, I can get my way. When you're identified with the body mind, that's the only way to full power, to full love, to full expression. But the true way, the real way, is going the other way, going deep within, right? And then that love builds, and that fear dissipates, and the needs of the body and mind for name and fame, for power, for glory, for pleasure, are no longer your battle. You move beyond them, right? They're no longer necessary. And you find that beautiful space of humanity. You know, when the heart is open and when love is flowing and wants nothing in return, that's when you find what you're looking for by becoming super big and super mean. All right, let's stop there for today.